10% of the Americans in Afghanistan behind.
Now, we have just concluded the largest air evacuation of civilians in American history. It was heroic. It was historic.
Heroic and historic.
Claiming victory. Like, look at us. We did the best job ever.
Well, and here again, like we do on the domestic front, you separate the rank and file carrying out orders heroically, truly, despite the infirmity and incompetence of their leadership, whether it's military or civilian. So we see, Chicago police officers who have to work under the leadership of Lori Lightfoot, for example. I think of that analogous to soldiers who have to work under the leadership of this president and his national security team. So I would just want to separate those. We're talking about the senior leadership of the military. We're talking about the policymakers at the White House, starting with the President of the United States, when we are making assessments here, not rank and file soldiers doing the best they can under difficult circumstances, to say the least. And then there's the matter of this phone call in July between President Biden and then Afghan President Ashraf Ghani. We talked about it a bit yesterday. Reuters got this transcript of the call leaked to them. We've seen this play out before. And again, Biden talking to Ghani about perception. I need not tell you the perception around the world and in parts of Afghanistan is that things aren't going well in terms of the fight against the Taliban. There's a need, whether it is true or not, there is a need to project a different picture. Ghani, responding to Biden in this call, what's crucial is close air support. And if I can make a request, you've been very generous. If your assistance, particularly to our Air Force, be front-loaded, because what we need at this moment, there was a very heavily reliance, on air power, and we have prioritized that. If it could be at all front-loaded, we would greatly appreciate it. And of course,
he said he'd do it, but I need to see your plan.
And of course, what we saw play out leading up to the fall of Kabul is the removal of air support by the Biden administration and intel services, and then the Afghan security forces folded, even as he and others, one of the talking points, in addition to they plan for every possibility, is, of course, that the Afghan security forces folded, and we couldn't have anticipated that, not our fault. Well, this conversation is fascinating. Jen Psaki, Biden's mouthpiece, was asked about it, and she said this.
Well, I'm not going to get into private diplomatic conversations or leaked transcripts of phone calls. But what I can reiterate for you is that we have stated many times that no one anticipated, the vast majority, I should say, there may have been individuals and agencies, so I don't want to eliminate that option, but our national security team and no one in Congress, or I would say most people out in the public, anticipated that the Taliban would be able to take over the country.
Not our fault. And so it's interesting just to note, because she and her fellow travelers had a very different perspective on leaked transcripts of private conversations between the President of the United States and a foreign leader not that long ago.
Yeah, and that conversation between Trump and the president of Ukraine, that is what led to the impeachment of him. And in a tweet that she put out September 24th, 2019, saying we need to see all of the transcripts and we need to see the conversations with the whistleblower. She was demanding it back then.
Maybe it could be part of the postmortem. We'll see. Ironically, and the ironies abound in this administration, one Ukrainian President Zelensky was at the White House sitting with Joe Biden as this is all playing out. And here's
can't make this stuff up.
Here's in part what Biden had to say to the press at their little show pony routine before the D.C. press corps. These are some of the topics that I'm going to discuss with Zelensky, including,
as well as a new energy and climate dialogue to help Ukraine diversify its energy supplies while supporting our climate goals relating to global warming.
So you have the irony of Zelensky there and Joe Biden unironically talking about energy policy in Ukraine.
Well, he could just consult his son, Hunter.
Exactly. Right point to the energy expert, the Burisma guru, Hunter Biden. This administration never fails to deliver, does it? For more on this, pleased to be joined by Jed Babbin, former U.S. Deputy Undersecretary of Defense, contributor to the Washington Times and the American Spectator. Jed, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Glad to be with you.
The phone call between Biden and Ghani in July, what should we take from that, from what we know of it?
Well, it's in part and parcel of the whole Biden approach to all of this. I mean, they lie. I mean, Biden has been lying consistently since the real crisis erupted. Going back to, well, there's no choice. There was always going to be chaos when we left, and of course, it was only chaos guaranteed because he was in charge. He says the only thing that we had to choose between is escalation or evacuation. Well, that's not true either. He could have left the strategic assets there to keep the Taliban from establishing safe harbors of terrorism. And now you've got this lie, and more and more lies. But the real important thing here, guys, the really important thing is he intentionally, with malice aforethought, abandoned Americans to the Taliban, American civilians. How dare he? This is the ultimate obligation of the American government, is to protect its citizens. That's the first duty of the sovereign. And he does not care.
So what's going to happen? Is there a plan? Does anybody know how they're going to get those Americans out? We know 24 students from Sacramento, including a 3-year-old American boy, they're in hiding right now.
Well, the only plan, Amy, is that Biden says, well, we're going to work with the Taliban and we're going to engage diplomatically and they're going to cooperate and help us get people out. Well, no, they're not. They're going to enslave these people. They're going to murder these people. They're going to hold them hostage. Maybe Biden wants to send another few $1 billion to the Taliban to ransom some of these people. But the fact of the matter is, these people are in danger of their lives, and he left them in that position. It is absolutely unforgivable.
90%, that's not good enough? 90%?
No. I mean, well, he did it backwards. Think about this. Dan, look, when you're going to do an evacuation, the first thing you do is you get the civilians out. You don't get the troops out first. You get the civilians out first. And then you get some of as much equipment as you can out of there. And then you blow up the embassy because, oh, by the way, the bad guys are going to reverse engineer all our protective systems like cybersecurity and other systems. And then you get the military out. Biden did it in precisely the wrong order, the opposite way of what it should be done. And the people who consented to this, agreed with this apparently enthusiastically, these so-called military leaders from Austin on down, they all ought to be fired for incompetence.
Yeah, and then what about this? The Taliban had a military parade pretty much showing off their new arsenal of weapons, which are our weapons. Why, first of all, didn't we get everybody out with the Barham Air Force Base first and then blow up the trucks? There's 22,000 vehicles we gave them, and then the Black Hawk helicopters. Yeah,
well, that's a very good question, and we should have held on to Bagram because there's more ramp space. I mean, i.e. places where you can park the aircraft far larger than the Hamid Karzai Airport. It's a little bit farther out of town, but so what? We could have established a larger defense perimeter, and, we would not have left a lot of stuff behind. I mean, one of my friends called up, and I can't swear to what he said, but he said that, because of the equipment we left behind, the Taliban has now the 7th largest air force in the world. Think about that.
Wow.
And they're going to learn how to fly this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and on that point, there's conflicting reports of whether or not the helicopters were disabled prior to departure or they weren't. So your sense is they were not?
Well, some were, some weren't. I mean, we just don't know.
Yeah, okay.
It's like the number of equipment. It's like the number of Americans left behind. We don't know. It could be 500, it could be 5,000.
Yeah, right.
But, the question is, if you don't have the foresight to, say, chuck a hand grenade into the cockpit of every helicopter and aircraft before you leave, that's kind of elementary, guys. I mean, this is what you do. The stuff you can't get out, you blow up. You could have done that.
There's also this story out yesterday. A former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, Roger Pardo Maurer, was on a Spanish television program interviewing on the topic. And he said that DOD had foreknowledge of the Kabul airport bomber and denied permission to fire a Predator drone that had a lock on the bomber. And there seems to be some radio chatter to that effect. Do you know anything about that?
Well, I've talked about that on radio before, and all I can say is that's a completely unconfirmed report.
Okay.
There's a lot of reasons, whether or not they had a lock on the guy, whether or not a drone was in position, whether or not you can fire, or you end up killing, 100 other people who are completely innocent.
Right.
There's a lot of things that go into that. And right now, I think I need a lot more information before I can spout off on it.
Fair enough. See if you can spout off on this. Jim Banks, who's a congressman and a veteran from Indiana, he tweeted out yesterday, I submitted an amendment today that would stop our taxpayer dollars from going to the Taliban, but we got word that the Dems blocked it. Only one reason why Dems would do that, they have future plans to send the Taliban aid. Is that your sense, and is this sort of like preemptory bribery to try to get more Americans out?
Well, it's preemptory bribery, and I think it is that case. I don't know whether it's aimed at getting more Americans out or not, but you've got, was it Jake Sullivan? I think the National Security Advisor was saying yesterday, oh, well, you know, we may provide some humanitarian aid and other things. And Tony Blinken, that idiot Secretary of State, he's saying, well, you know, the Taliban promised not to harbor any Islamic terrorists. Excuse me, the Taliban are Islamic terrorists. I mean, what the heck is this guy talking about? Again, it's all the same chatter, and just that's all it really is. It's these people with brainless chatter and not understanding what's going on, and really, frankly, not caring.
You know what, Jed, perhaps you remember this. We could resuscitate the Jobs for Terrorists program that President Obama wanted to launch to make friends of the Taliban.
Yeah, I think that's probably what we could do, and I think Biden's perfectly capable of doing that. Well, guys, you know me. I mean, if I were in that position of power anywhere, I would be a lot harder on the Taliban. I had been killing a whole lot of them and getting our people out first.
Mm. Wow. In addition to our people, and that is a ranked priority, our people, Americans. But this State Department official reportedly, according to Politico, said in a private briefing to reporters, the majority of special immigrant visa applicants were left in Afghanistan. These are individuals who helped the military during our 20-year presence in Afghanistan. If we see the slaughter of Americans, or even the slaughter of Afghan allies who were SIV, had special immigrant visas, what does that do to our standing in the world, in addition to the harm that's already been done?
Well, it sure hurts more. And, you know, we've already seen the Taliban going door to door, using the biometric data that we left behind. Oh, by the way, that should have been something else we destroyed before we left. Trying to identify people who had helped us and executing some of them on the spot. I mean, this is going on right now. I mean, to say that the kinder, gentler Taliban, there is no such thing. You know, these guys are going to be doing what they have always done and killing people, and we have lost an enormous amount of. Well, it's not just a question of face and status. It's really the question of whether our allies can rely on us anymore. And under the Biden administration, they can't. China is looking at Taiwan, licking their chops. They know damn well Biden's not going to intervene to defend Taiwan. The Israelis are probably scared to death right now because Biden still wants to go and do his stupid deal with the Iranians again to renew the Obama deal. There are an awful lot of people. I mean, even the Europeans are saying, gee, you know, we really need our own forces now. Of course, they'll never do it because they don't want to invest the money. But all of the people around the country, around the world, who thought they could rely on America now know they can't. And that's a very dangerous place for us to be in.
He is Jed Babbin, former U.S. Deputy Undersecretary of Defense, contributor to the Washington Times and the American Spectator as well. Jed, thanks as always.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.